Welcome in, everyone. Welcome back to your new favorite fantasy football show. Isaac Durham here alongside Tarian Rogers, and we are your fantasy GMs. Tarian, how's it going?
Going well, man. Going well.
You done any fantasy drafts yet?
Man, I got one in about an hour, So I got like four or five of them already. I don't know what's wrong with my voice right now. I got the Phil Jackson voice, but you know, we go get it popping. I think it's because like I'm yelling so much that my guy's getting picked like damn, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I guess that's why my voice is gone. But we're here to rock and roll with you.
Yeah. So we got a stack show today. We're going to go over some injuries, what we can expect from the replacements, dynasty deep dives, how today's cuts affect your fantasy team, maybe some bold predictions at the end. But let's start out with the most shocking news of the day. The New England Patriots cutting Cam Newton. Tarian, were you surprised by this?
I mean, not really.
You weren't surprised he got cut?
I mean, okay, so the whole it's kind of a weird year with COVID, right? Because he's an unvaccinated player, so
That's true.
you don't want him being around, the team and the players and stuff. So that was the one reason why I was surprised. Why I wasn't surprised, but on the field, yeah, I mean they could use a veteran presence as a backup. I still don't trust Brian Hoyer. Brian Hoyer has been in the league forever, and he hasn't really been capable of much of anything. But so now, it's an offense that's positioned for Mac Jones to be successful in. And Cam, you have too many limitations as far as him as a thrower. You're going to put him in more running positions and positions for him to utilize his legs more than you are his arm. And for that, I think the Patriots offense is more geared to want to throw the ball a little bit more. So Mac Jones obviously becomes a guy. So there's too much flexibility, too much like liabilities on the offensive side of the ball when you have one or the other. So it wasn't really that surprising to me, to be honest with you.
Well, I was shocked, but yeah, I guess you put in that COVID-19, the unvaccination from him. I mean, that definitely makes sense. It's just like we've heard all offseason, like, hey, this is a quarterback battle. One of the two is going to win the job. We were all expecting something to be announced, after the last preseason game, and then we didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, Cam's out the door. So, I mean, I was shocked, but I mean, it makes sense. They're making sure that Mac Jones is their guy. So I'm excited for Mac Jones. I'm excited for the fantasy players on that team now a little bit more. Instead of Cam Newton with that bum shoulder of his that he can't
Right.
throw the ball down the field. But who are some of the guys that you're more intrigued in targeting in the New England offense now that
Okay, so
he's the
so
quarterback?
so now like I'm looking at Johnny Smith, Damian Harris.
Mhm.
I've always been a fan of Damian Harris as a running back, but with a lot of goal line touches, Cam Newton was the guy in the goal line. I think he had like 8 rushing touchdowns on the goal line, so he takes a lot of
Yeah.
rushing touchdowns away from you. Now with him out, Damian Harris to me obviously becomes a guy that you want to use more in the goal line. So his target share in the end zone could in the red zone could be a little bit more. And Johnny Smith, he's a guy that's has obvious potential. He's a guy that you drafted high last year with the Titans, and because you have AJ Brown, because you have Derrick Henry and other guys such as that, he wasn't used as much. But now on the outside, you have a guy like Nelson Aguilar, who I don't consider a number one receiver. And, on the other side of that, which you got Jacoby Myers and a bunch of other guys that I don't really consider number one
Kendrick
receivers either.
Bourne, yeah.
Kendrick Bourne. So all of
Right.
a sudden, Johnny Smith, and you got to consider he's a Patriot, and Patriots love tight ends, Rob Gronkowski and guys like that. So Johnny Smith is a guy I expect, and if Hunter Henry can stay healthy, he's another guy I expect to do something.
Yeah, and him being unhealthy to start the season will definitely help out Jonathan Smith's fantasy impact. I am intrigued more with Damian Harris. The Sony Michelle trade freed his fantasy stock up a little bit as well. So they're going to keep the rookie Ramondre Stevenson in a more prominent role. He seems like a guy that could be a goal line type of player as well. But you got James White as the other running back on that team. I think he benefits a little bit now as the third down back. With Cam in there, there's not a lot of big play abilities as far as passing game goes. James White, he's a great pass catcher out of the backfield, and I think Mac Jones is going to rely on him heavily, as well as Jonnu. And I like Damian Harris's impact as well. Any other notes on the New England Patriots? What do you expect from Mac Jones in his fantasy stock this season?
Um, I could see it going one or two ways. I could see him having, a solid rookie year, and I could see him having struggles along the way. Week 1, I fired up the Miami Dolphins defense just because I don't know what I'm getting from him. His first game, they have really 2 lockdown corners with Miami, with Xavier Howard and Byron Jones, so they have a solid defense, and that's a game where he could struggle a lot. They're going to be seeing a lot of, he could be seeing a lot of 8-man fronts, blitzing a lot, because you're not really trusting, what's on the outside. So I could see him having really good games. I could see him having struggles. And week 1, I feel like he's going to struggle just a little bit, but we're going to see steady improvements from him, so that's kind of what I see.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, he's still a rookie, so
right.
He's going to take a little bit of time.
It'll be a learning curve.
So let's go right to another rookie in the league. But this guy, not as much hype going into the season, obviously, because Travis Etienne is out for the season. He has that foot injury, devastating news in a time that we're seeing like too many injuries right now,
right.
Honestly. But like I said, missed the entire season. Who can you expect to step up? Is it James Robinson? Does Carlos Hyde have a role? Where are you drafting these guys if you are drafting them in fantasy?
I'm personally not high on any of the Jacksonville running backs off the simple fact that their offensive line isn't very good. Mm-hmm. You have a rookie quarterback in there, so you're going to try to give him those happy feet. A guy that I'm really high on is Laviska Shenault, though, on the Jaguars. Yep. And the reason I say Laviska Shenault is because you got to think about who their head coach is. He's a guy who's coached Percy Harvin before. Their offensive coordinator has Percy Harvin ties from Seattle and the Vikings, and Darrell Bevell. So he's a guy I could see being used in special ways. Like I said, Braxton Miller, he's had him at Ohio State. So he's a guy that does a little bit of everything. He can carry the ball out of the backfield. He can catch short little swing passes. He's a guy that I could see being a rookie security blanket. So he's a guy I'm looking at that I think will have high fantasy impact. I'm not big on DJ Chark this year. I'm not big on, any other guys like Marvin Jones. I'm not big on any of these guys this year, but I am really, really high on Laviska Shenault.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely see him in the same role that you just mentioned, that Percy Harvin role, kind of like that gadget receiver that's going to get, a lot of opportunities, a lot of targets, even in like the flat routes, like some jet sweeps, bubble screens, anything like that. I think he's going to be heavily involved. And it seems like he's got a really good connection with Trevor already. So I'm excited for him. And, I will draft James Robinson. But my question for you is, when would you draft him?
I know he's going really, really early because because a lot of people do in fantasy football, because running back is a highly coveted position. Mm-hmm. So you see the next best available running back and you see somebody go down, I got to pick him. I got to draft him. So he's going to go high. Theoretically, I'd probably look maybe somewhere 8th round, 7th round, just because, like I said, the offensive line is just, I'm not a big fan of the Jaguars offensive line at all. Mm-hmm. And I don't see it being the same team as they were last year. I think that they covet more of a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield, and James Robinson hasn't really showed his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And you got to think they tried to replace you, like Travis Etienne, you drafted him. So it's like, I don't know how high they were on him in the first place, but now he's kind of being force-fed a position to play. So you got to kind of take him as, you will now, because now he's going to be the number one guy. So, yeah.
I mean, you said it, running backs are probably one of the more, looked at positions when you are drafting. And I would take a chance on James Robinson if he made it to like the middle of the 6th round. I don't think I'm going to wait till the 8th round.
Right.
But I do see that he could see like some targets out of the backfield, because Etienne was going to be that running back that was going to get all the targets. Robinson and Hyde aren't really known to be great receivers. So, I mean, he could improve. We've seen Leonard Fournette over his career improve, a guy that, looked like he couldn't catch anything coming his way. So he couldn't catch a dead goose. And so I think that Robinson in the middle of the 6 has value, but anywhere before that, I kind of agree. I'm not as high on him as, we were last year in the middle of the season when Jacksonville was, tanking and they were just giving him all the work.
Right.
So let's go to another running back who has suffered a season-ending injury, and J.K. Dobbins. He will miss the entire season. It's torn ACL, and there's some concerns that maybe it's even a bit more than that. We're still waiting on some more news on that. But are you high on like Gus Edwards because of this injury, or who else do you like?
I'm very high on Gus Edwards, and you look at the Ravens team that has been number one in rushing the last 2 years. So they love running the ball. You know, you got to think who their offensive coordinator is. He's never not running the football. Gus Edwards is a guy who's averaged 5.2 yards per carry last year when he did play. So that's nearly damn near first round per clip. So he's a guy that's going to get a lot of usage and a lot of burn out of the backfield. Where the concern is that he might not be the most reliable receiving back out of the backfield. So that's where they got the undrafted guy from BYU and Tyson Williams, a guy that they're said to be very high on. He's another guy in preseason that averaged 5 yards per carry. So they said to be very high on him. And I know there's been rumors about, you know, Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley going there, but I think that they've liked enough what they've seen from Gus Edwards and Tyson Williams where I don't know if they're going to go that route, you know. So with that being said, a team that runs at a very high level, there's no reason why you would not draft a Gus Edwards or at least start pursuing a Tyson Williams later on in the draft. He's going to be a steal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I like Edwards a lot. And really the Ravens don't have a lot of running backs that ever catch the ball a ton out of the backfield anyways. It's not really their style. They're a very run-heavy team, and they led the league in rushing in total last season as an offensive unit. Gus Edwards, through his first 3 seasons, has quietly topped 700 rushing yards in each of his first 3 seasons. So I think that's a reliable backup that you can plug in. And now it's like, hey, he could top 1,000 rushing yards this season the way that they run the ball. And it's crazy that, you know, we look at the depth chart that they release and they have Tyson Williams leapfrogging Justice Hill, a guy that they really liked last season as well. So I could see Williams becoming that backup and maybe the guy that does catch the passes out of the backfield, like you said. Let's switch to a different position. You know, the tight end position is a spot where we don't really see a bunch of reliable tight ends each and every year. But there was a lot of hype going into, you know, fantasy draft weekends where people were targeting Irv Smith in the later rounds, and they thought this could be, you know, a breakout season for him. And then he's getting surgery now on it's a meniscus injury. We really don't know how severe it will be yet. There was the first timetable that came out was like 2 to 4 weeks, and then it was like, hey, if he fully tore it, I mean, he will miss the entire season. So they went ahead and traded for Chris Herndon today from the Jets. They also have Tyler Conklin still. You know, they had Kyle Rudolph last year. He's gone to the Giants. So who do you expect? It doesn't have to be a tight end, but who do you expect will step up now that Smith is out for quite some time?
For the Vikings or just in general?
For the Vikings.
Oh, okay, for the Vikings. I think that Chris Herndon is a guy that I've always been interested in. Every year he's supposed to be this fantasy football steal. You know, we've seen him his rookie year, and he showed a lot of potential, but then he just never lived up to the potential. Now I think that he's on a better team, better offense. He has the potential to do something. But you're still going to look at Justin Jefferson. You're still going to look at Adam Thielen. There you go, Adam Thielen. There's still a running football team with Cook. You know, Ola BC Johnson is a guy, you know, in the slot that they've always been pretty high on.
He's out for the year.
Oh, he's out for the year? Okay, so, you know, there you go. So, I mean, Conklin was a guy that has some interest to me because toward the end of last year, he had some solid games. You know, I think he ended the season with the last 4 games like 15 catches, 100 something like 100 yards, like 2 touchdowns. So he's a guy that has showed some fantasy football value in the past. But it's just really, you know, I think they're going to stay with the formula of running the football and, you know, getting Justin Jefferson and Thielen on the deep passes, you know. So, but that kind of goes to my question. How do you feel about Kirk Cousins? You know, because I know a lot of teams haven't been drafting Kirk Cousins at all, you know, so he's been available in a lot of my leagues. You know, so yeah.
I mean, I've always liked Kirk Cousins as a streaming quarterback, maybe even a backup for your team in the later rounds. You know, he had one of his better seasons last year. But the thing that concerns me is, you know, they wanted Justin Fields in the first round. They tried to replace him. They went ahead and drafted Kellen Mond. So I think there's something that we don't really know about. So that's the only thing that kind of concerns me. You know, he threw for over 35 touchdowns last year. So he had a really good season, but I expect the defense to be better in Minnesota. I expect, you know, they're not going to allow 30 to 40 points a game. So they're going to run the ball more. They're going to run the clock a little bit more. They're not going to be behind in every single game. So Cousins, his production is going to go down, I assume. I have him ranked like as my quarterback 14, I think. So I mean, someone that you can still plug in depending on the matchup, but I'm not trying to target him by any means. But I do like, going into this offseason, everyone's like, hey, Adam Thielen, he's in his 31-year age season, expected decline. Then Johnson's out for the season, and now Irv Smith has an injury. I don't think this is the season where Thielen's going to really drop off. I think he's still going to have a lot of value. Jefferson, he has that nagging shoulder injury, so I don't even know if he's still going to be the wide receiver 1 overall for that team, but I still like both of them. I just don't see much of a regression for Thielen. So I don't know. Those two and then Dalvin Cook, and there's no one else to be excited about.
There's really nobody. Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, and I think that's it for the injury updates. So let's get into some dynasty deep dives. We've seen some cuts today. Nothing too major outside of Cam Newton. But who are some guys that you're looking at in dynasty that you think can, their fantasy stock has risen because of some cuts today?
Yeah, and not to be biased or a homer, but I got to go Bryan Edwards for the Raiders. John Brown asked for his release today, so he's the clear number 2. The biggest issue with him was injuries last year and being a rookie and not having training camp. But this year in training camp, they've been drawing comparisons to Randy Moss and Terrell Owens. I don't think those are higher praises, but that's what John Gruden has said. He makes a lot of catches in traffic, so that's deep balls, jump balls, things of that nature. Darren Waller's not sneaking up on anybody this year, so he might see a lot of double teams. So with a big body receiver with a lot of one-on-one coverage, and now your job as number 1, number 2 receiver solidified, Bryan Edwards is a guy that I think that is going to have a big year, and I think he's going to improve. Some other guys, like I mentioned, Tyson Williams, based off the fact of injury, he's going to see some more action on a team that loves to run the football. Like I said, Gus Edwards is a number 2 running back last year, had 800 yards, and he had more carries than J.K. Dobbins did a year ago. And I'm not saying Tyson Williams can have more carries than Gus Edwards, but he may get a lot of carries and he may see a lot of carries. The Rams running back position intrigues me a lot too. You mentioned Sonny Michel earlier. Yeah. Sonny Michel's a guy that the Rams seem to like a lot. And Sean McVay is never really set in stone with his running back position. As we seen last year, week 1, Malcolm Brown had an amazing game. A lot of people got Malcolm Brown, and then he didn't do anything the rest of the year. And then it was Darrell Henderson. So it could be we could see a lot of that, So he's a good streaming start a lot of the times. Sonny Michel. So those are some of the guys that I'm kind of looking at,
Yeah, I could see Michelle having a pretty decent season because even when Cheeseburger CJ Anderson joined that team a couple of years ago, I mean, he hadn't done anything for a couple of years, and all of a sudden he's their best running back in the playoffs and even in the Super Bowl because Todd Gurley had, his little nagging knee injury that he was dealing with. So I like Michelle. His ADP, I just looked at it. He's being drafted in the middle of the 12th round right now. So I think that's a steal. Some guys that I found interesting as far as cuts go. Travis Fulgham, the leading receiver for the Eagles last season, was placed on waivers today. So I think that really opens up more opportunity for guys like Devontae Smith and Jalen Reagor. I'm not sold on them by any means, but as far as dynasty deep dives, I think Jalen Reagor is a guy you can target later on in your dynasty startups. And, he could have a good outlook for this season and beyond. The Chargers released Tyron Johnson, wide receiver. So I think that opens up more opportunities for that wide receiver 3 spot for a rookie like Josh Palmer. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are easily the top 2. Mike Williams is dealing with a little injury right now. I think it's a hamstring injury. So Palmer could be a guy as far as dynasty deep dives you could target later on. And then another guy that was cut that I was surprised by was Antonio Gandy-Golden in Washington. They don't have a lot of wide receiver depth. They drafted Diami Brown as well. So I think Diami Brown's dynasty fantasy stock is going up. Curtis Samuel's dealing with an injury. We don't know when he's going to come back. So they don't really have a sure wide receiver 2 outside of or opposite of Terry McLaurin right now. So Diami Brown, North Carolina wide receiver. I think he was a third 4th round draft pick. I think that he could turn some heads in the dynasty and fantasy world. You got any other ones on the top of your head?
Yeah, absolutely. Marquise Callaway from the Saints.
Oh yeah,
he's I love him. Jameis Winston is now the starter, so we know who the starter is. We
Yep.
know Jameis Winston loves to go deep. He loves going deep. And Marquise Callaway in preseason, I know preseason may not mean much, but his last preseason game that he played, he had 2 touchdowns. 2 of them were deep balls. You know, and we know that Jameis Winston's a guy that's going to target you a lot if he likes you. You know, so I think Marquise Callaway right now, looking at the Saints situation, you know, they're not going to have Michael Thomas for an awful long time. You know, and Traquan Smith, there's questions there. Tight end position, there's questions there. So there's questions all over the Saints offense. So he's a guy that I would target, you know, just because of who his quarterback is.
Yeah.
And I think another position that really intrigues me is the Atlanta Falcons backup running back position, because you got to.
I'm confused by that, but
I'm confused by that too. I'm very confused by that. But the thing about that is Arthur Smith is a guy from the Titans that loves to run the football.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he's always big on. I cannot say his first name to save my life, so maybe you can help me with that. The Falcons backup running back, Olo something.
Alamale.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the big O. Like I'm not talking about Oscar Robinson, the big O. So
I'm gonna read it and I'm gonna try to say it, because everyone's talking about how Cordero Patterson's really the running back too.
Really?
But, yeah. So actually, they kept Quadre Olison.
Okay, Quadre Olison. There you go.
So what I was saying, why I was confused, was they had a very talented undrafted rookie running back that a lot of people were high on as far as dynasty goes, and Javion Hawkins. And they cut him actually in the middle of last week, so before their final preseason game. And I went to the Bears-Titans Week 3 preseason game here in Nashville, and the PA announcer was like, "Hey, Hawkins on the carry," and I was like, "Whoa! Like, wasn't he just on the Falcons?" And they said he was. Like 2 days ago, Hawkins was on the Titans, and he was battling for a roster spot there. He ended up being cut anyways today, so maybe Atlanta grabs him, places him on their practice squad. But I don't understand what they're doing, because they really only have 2 real running backs on their team right now, and Mike Davis, and then that Quadre Olison, another guy that was undrafted, and then Cordell Patterson's their other one. So and he's more of a wide receiver. I mean, you saw how that went in Chicago. It doesn't work well. But another name that I thought was intriguing, this was a couple days ago, so it wasn't from today's cut. Rashad Perriman, pretty much the only like guaranteed contract for the Lions from the wide receiver position. He was waived in a surprising move. I think this opens up more opportunity for Amon-Ra St. Brown, the rookie from USC. If you had to pick a wide receiver from the Detroit Lions, who would you take a chance at in the later rounds?
Well, obviously, I think Hawkinson might be the fantasy football tight end of the year, to be honest with you. Yeah. But if I had to go wide receiver, it's going to be Tyrell Williams. But I don't trust Tyrell Williams because he has a pretty lengthy injury history. He's currently out with a groin right now. But if I had to go somewhere, it would be him, just because he's a guy that has who has had 1,000-yard season before. Yeah. So he's had 1,000-yard season before quietly with the Chargers. And he's a guy that, you know, has had 5 straight weeks of a touchdown when he was with the Raiders. So he's shown some fantasy football capabilities. It's just injuries, you know. And now that he's truly the number 1 receiver on the Lions, there could be a lot of potential for him there to get a lot of targets. So he's a guy I got my eye on.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. All right, let's go into the bold predictions. I'm going to start. I have a few of them. I'm going to start with one that you kind of already hinted at. I have TJ Hawkinson finishing inside the top 4 amongst tight ends this season. Mm-hmm. You already said it. His opportunity is there. The receivers around him they're no names. You brought up Tyrell Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Quintez Cephas, and there's no one around him. So there's no reason why he can't break out again this season. Last year was kind of a breakout. It wasn't a full breakout. So I think Jared Goff is going to rely on him heavily. Do you have a bold prediction to throw out there?
As far as, you know, catching and tight ends and running backs and all that's concerned, I like Javarius Williams from the Denver Broncos. I think that he's going to have 1,000 yards, all-purpose yards, and he's going to be amongst the top fantasy running backs in all of football. and I think he's going to be a top rookie of the year candidate as well as a running back position. I just look at a Denver team that they're going to want to run the football. I wish Clayton was here so he could fact check me, but they're a team that's going to love to run the football. I'm not really 100% on the offensive line, so they're a team that loves to throw the ball out of the backfield. So you drafted him for a reason. So he's a guy that I like a whole lot, and I see him going high in a lot of drafts, as high as the 5th, 6th round, and for a reason. I think that he's gonna top all the rookie running backs. Another guy, like I said last week, Trey Sermon is another guy I like a lot. I think around week 5, week 6-ish. He might start to jump on a lot of fantasy radars, but as of now, I like Williams from the early set. I think that he's going to start week 1, and he's just going to get better as the weeks progress. Gordon is a guy that his contract's almost up. Dealing with injuries, groin injuries, and upper leg injuries. We know what's new, right? And so we know that ceiling with the running back position always has a ceiling on it, And so this guy is gunning for your job. So I love Jarvis Williams.
And we have a question. Is having Julio and A.J. Brown a bad thing, or should I look for a trade? Taran, I'll let you answer that first.
So does he have both of those guys on the one team?
I think that's what he's saying. He has both of them.
If I had to keep one of them, it would be A.J. Brown, right? But I don't think keeping both of them on your team is necessarily a bad thing. But you got to also consider what team they're on. The Titans. They're a team that Derrick Henry loves to run the football. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities in the goal line for jump fades and things of that nature. But if I had to catch one of them, it'd be A.J. Brown.
Here's what I would do.
Right.
I would stick with both of them to start the season. The week that Julio goes off, tops 100 yards, maybe hauls in a touchdown or two, is the week I'm trading him because you're going to get great value out of him. A.J. Brown is going to be the steady wide receiver that's going to produce all season. Julio played, 10 games last season?
Right.
Less than that? I mean, he's getting up there in age, and he's not going to be as heavily involved as he was in Atlanta. Tennessee runs their offense through Derrick Henry. A.J. Brown is obviously a stud. Tannehill can sling it at times. They're a safe team that I can't see all three of them producing elite numbers as far as fantasy numbers go. So I think Julio is the guy that is heavily involved, and the injuries scare me. So I think week 2, week 3, he has a crazy week. Trade him. Just get rid of him. Get great value. Get a good running back out of him.
So, for example, so the question I would have, Jonnu Smith, we talked about him earlier. He's no longer there. They don't have really a essential number one tight end, maybe Frisker, or whatever, however you say his last name.
Anthony
Frisker, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that Julio Jones, they might use him as their tight end? Essentially, he's a big-bodied guy, He could get a lot of the red zone targets, a lot of the big key first downs, things of that nature, like they use him on third down. Line him up, in the slot. He's a big, burly type guy that if you put him on a nickel, it's not fair because he's normally used to being a number one receiver. He's going to go to the Titans, not be a number one receiver anymore. It's going to be AJ. So,
yeah. I mean, what do you expect about Jonnu Smith going to him right now? What do you expect from him as far as tight end numbers go this season?
Because when you talk about fantasy tight ends, you have the three guys. You have you have Kelsey, you have Waller, and you have Kittle, and then and now we just mentioned Hawkinson, and then after that, to me, there's a huge drop off.
And maybe Andrews, I'll throw that name in there.
But Andrews, right? And I think number 5, number 6 position are really up for grabs. He could take that, to be perfectly honest with you. As a rookie quarterback, a lot of the times you want those security blankets, and he's a mismatch. And Bill has always talked about how he loves his speed. Even when he was on the Titans, he loved his speed, so that's why he's there. So you could see him being used in unique positions. And I don't know, throwing the name Aaron Hernandez around, but the way that they use – I don't know how that works nowadays, but I saw the way they use Aaron Hernandez, and he has a lot of Aaron Hernandez traits as far as tight ends are concerned. We've seen Aaron Hernandez being used as a running back, fullback a lot of times.
And that's what Tennessee did with Jonnu, too. He lined up as fullback a lot as well.
Right. So a lot of play action, tight reads. I think he's going to have a big year, and I think the 5th and 6th position is up for grabs. I think he can slide into one of those spots.
So I agree. I'm going to pivot into something else, another one of my bold predictions real quick.
Okay.
I was very high all off season about this running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. After last season, I was lower on him, and then I got more interested in him because I liked his ADP, and I just saw something today that he was rated like the third worst pass catching running back last year as far as like PFF rankings go, and that kind of scares me, especially in a PPR league, which is a league that I like playing in more. I think 4 out of the 5 leagues I'm playing in this season are full PPR. And I snagged him in our Dynasty League, which is a full PPR league as well. And I was excited until about today. I think this season, I think he's going to finish outside the top 20 running backs. I honestly do, because you have, they like Darrell Williams. They brought in Jerick McKinnon, 2 guys that catch the ball a lot out of the backfield. And it's the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to,
Right.
I mean, they're not going to run down your throat. I think Edwards-Helaire leads the team in carries, but who knows how many carries that's actually going to be. I mean, what do you think about him? I'm kind of low on him.
I was very high on him last year, but then I had to think about it. The Chiefs' offensive line was pretty dirt last year.
Oh, yeah.
And now they're much improved. So I could see him having a much better rookie year. And he didn't finish the year last year neither, with injury. So I think this year it could be a lot better with the offensive line. Now it's one of their strengths. It was one of their weaknesses. Now it's one of their strengths. So it wouldn't shock me if he would, he's not a first rounder like he was last year. If you get him in the middle of the 3rd round, I think he's a steal, and I would definitely see what he has just because he's a Chief. And
I mean, that's true. Yeah.
So I mean, no matter what, if he's your best running back on your team, I'd be scared. But if he's like your second best running back, your RB2, I think it's a good RB2.
Okay. Any other bold predictions from you?
I'm very high on Kyler Murray and Justin Herbert, and it wouldn't shock me if one of those 2 were the top fantasy quarterbacks this year.
Kyler had it in the bag last season.
Right.
He was the quarterback 1 for most of the season, and then the last week, I think he put up like 3.2 fantasy points, just a total dud. And Josh Allen leapfrogged him right at the end. But I love Kyler Murray. I still have Mahomes ranked higher than him, but I'm not targeting Mahomes and like over Murray just because that Mahomes his ADP is like what? It's like 2nd round right now, middle of the 2nd round, maybe even high end 2nd round. You can find Kyler at the end of the 4th, so I'm targeting him. You can find Herbert
5th, 6th.
Yeah, I was gonna say middle 6th, early 7th.
Mm-hmm.
I like Aaron Rodgers' ADP right now. I like Tom Brady's. I mean, if you're listening to this right now, you don't have to get one of those, Mahomes or Josh Allen's at the beginning. You can get valuable picks if you still have a draft coming up. You can load up on running back, wide receiver. You can find that quarterback after the 6th, 7th round, honestly. And Ryan Tannehill, we did the mock draft last week. I got him like at 9.6 or something like that.
Right.
The 9th round. A guy that finished quarterback 6 last season.
He's being undervalued. He's always undervalued.
Yeah.
And I look at some of the guys that are being undervalued. You got Baker Mayfield that gets undervalued. Derek Carr gets undervalued. A lot of they're not even drafted in a lot of leagues.
Derek Carr's not. Yeah, both
He's
of them.
never
You're right.
drafted,
Yeah, they're never drafted. So you could take a chance on them with your last pick. I mean, 80% of the time your last pick's not going to work out. So you might as well just take a chance.
You get a quarterback.
Anyways.
Right.
Yeah. So for those that are going to draft this week or even this weekend, what's something that you want to give out as far as advice goes?
Like we just said, you don't have to reach on the quarterback. You could take a quarterback at in the 6th, 7th. Russell Wilson is a guy too that's getting underdrafted a lot as well. So don't reach on a quarterback. You don't need Patrick Mahomes. You don't need a Josh Allen. You don't need these guys. And also don't reach on kickers. Because I see that an awful lot, reaching on a kicker. Like there's this wise tale that Justin Tucker is always the number 1 kicker. He wasn't even a number 1 kicker last year. It was Tyler Bass. So you don't have to reach on him or the Chiefs kicker. And I'm gonna tell you another funny story. A lot of people have been reaching high on Antonio Brown too. I seen a draft the other day, a picture. So someone sent me Antonio Brown was a number 1 pick in someone's draft. Antonio Brown went in the 5th round. I've been seeing him go in the 7th round. Yes, Antonio.
Oh my goodness! And
I don't want to say any names, but a guy on ESPN is very high on Antonio Brown. Mm-hmm. Their main fantasy football expert, very high on Antonio Brown. So people are taking that advice and literally thinking that's going to be the same Antonio Brown from the Steelers. So Do
Yeah,
do with
I
that
know.
as you may, but Antonio Brown.
See, I've done a ton of mock drafts, and I've liked where I've seen him because I've seen him around like the 11th or 12th round. I think that's a good spot for Antonio Brown. Um, I guess I'm behind the game. I haven't seen anyone, take a chance on him within the first 8 or 9 rounds. So
He
that's
was a
that's
first round pick in a draft I seen. Like
yeah.
so,
Well,
I'm in
I don't.
a fantasy football group chat, and if you guys are on, you can back me up and tell them this is true. He was like the number 5, number 6 pick in the fantasy football draft, and I sat there and I was like, bro, if this was 2018, boy, you would have had you a sleeper. But in 2021,
Yeah.
no, no way. I think he's gonna have a better season than he did last year, obviously, because he jumped in the middle of the year and a full off season with Tom Brady. But going that high is
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, we still have a little bit of time left. What did you say? You have your draft in 18 minutes now? So,
Yeah.
Let's stick with wide receivers real quick. For those that haven't drafted, when are you taking a chance on your first wide receiver in the first round, and who is it?
Okay, so it's really depending on who you want, right? If you want Hopkins, you're gonna have to go maybe with your second pick with the Hopkins because I've seen him go as high as that. If you want, Devontae Adams, if you want AJ Brown, second, third round. But for me, I'm the type of person to where I want to get my running back situation, fit straight out first. Because for me, I've have drafts where I go one team. I'll just say one team, for example, Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a guy who has 70, catches last year, 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns. He's a guy I've been getting the third and fourth round. And then I paired him with a Robert Woods, a guy that had, 80 catches, almost 1,000 yards, 9 to 10 touchdowns. And then Robbie Anderson following that up like number 9 or 10, quietly has 1,000 yards every year, and then I feel, like I said, with a Marquise Callaway going later on. And I feel very secure about my wide receiver position. Like I like Cooper Kupp, another guy that I have in a lot of my teams. These are guys to me that you don't have to, get, like we said, you don't have to reach on quarterback. You don't have to go high and get the Adams, Hopkins. You could be okay with getting a Robert Woods. You can be okay with getting a Mike Evans. You can be okay getting a Cooper Kupp. You can get okay with getting a lot of these guys because, again, they're quiet 1,000-yard receivers with a lot of catches, a lot of volume,
Yeah. You didn't really answer my question, though.
Okay.
Are you drafting a first-round wide receiver if you have a chance? Like, let's say you have the 10th, 11th, 12th pick. The top 10 picks were running backs. You going to pick another running back? You going to pick the running back 11 over your wide receiver 1?
No, I'm going tight end first, actually. I'm not going wide. Kelsey or Waller.
Yeah.
Because tight end.
You picking Waller end of first round, maybe?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Because you have to think with the Raiders, he's their number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah. I haven't done it yet. I've taken him high second round, but I haven't taken him end of first.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm the same way as you when I go into a draft. My mind is on running back. That's
right.
I mean, when you get past the third round, there's no one that you can really rely on. I mean, you'll have once in a while, you'll have those James Robinsons or the DeAndre Swifts that, you drafted later on or even just went undrafted. And by week 2 that they're going to be like that all season. There's just not enough running backs to feel safe about. I mean, Damian Harris is a guy that you can find later on that has really good value.
And you think about running back. Oh, sorry, but when you think about running backs, they never really emerge until week 1 because James Robinson wasn't drafted high last year. Neither was Antonio Gibson. He really wasn't drafted that high last year. Yeah. I found him in a lot of waiver wires.
Yeah, Gibson didn't even start the season as the running back 1 on their depth chart. It was like Peyton Barber or something like that.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. Like running backs later, slowly but surely want to unveil themselves. Like I think a guy like Michael Carter is an example of that, right? He's not the jet starter right now. He's like 4th on their depth chart, but later on in the season, he may start. Yeah. And you may find him in a free agent wire, so that's where I'm saying, like, if you know what you know with the first 5 picks or within the first 5 rounds at running back, it's okay, because later on you're going to end up finding somebody on the waiver wire later on. Mm-hmm. James Robinson, like I said, was a guy that didn't get drafted last year.
Mm-hmm. Well, back to what we were talking about as far as wide receivers go, I am totally okay with taking Devontae or Tyreek Hill if the first 10 picks are 9 running backs and then Travis Kelce. I agree with you. I'm taking Kelce over those 2
right.
More times than none. But I'm okay with taking them, 10th, 11th, 12th, whatever. And then I'm quickly turning around after that and getting a running back because I'm not going to wait till the third round to take my top running back. I'm not going to have, even though I love David Montgomery, Bears fan, I'm not taking him or Josh Jacobs as my running back one, especially in a PPR league.
Right. Yeah, right, and rightfully so. I think when you start drafting, it's about value. Like, what can I get now that I can't get later on? Mm-hmm. And that's why I go tight end till I, because like I said, outside of the three tight ends, the Kelceys, the Wallers, the Kittles, the Hawkinsons, there is a huge drop off. So I want my tight end to be set first. Because wide receivers, there's not a huge drop off. Like, if you don't get Tyreek Hill, if you don't get Adams, you don't get Hopkins, you can get Mike Evans later on. You can get Robbie Anderson later on. You can get these guys later on and still be okay knowing that you have a 1,000-yard receiver on your team. I would rather make sure I have a 1,000-yard running back, a guy that gets touches first before wide receiver. That's just always been my philosophy. Same thing with tight end.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes the circumstances don't line up to where I get one of those tight ends, but
right.
I really want to get one of those big three. If I don't, I'm taking a chance on a Hawkinson or a Mark Andrews in the, 5th round or later. Maybe even like a Robert Tonyan, like later on. If I miss out on those first 5, 6, like a Kyle Pitts as well, I'm waiting even longer because now I'm gonna get one of my quarterbacks. I'm gonna add more running backs, more talented wide receivers. A big rule I have as well, and I am targeting tight ends early. If you get a tight end in the first 2 rounds, don't draft a quarterback in the first 4 or 5. You might be excited about having a Patrick Mahomes and a Travis Kelce, but now you're missing out on elite top-tier talent at running back and wide receiver. You're going to play catch-up all season, and you're going to have to get lucky to get out of that situation.
Exactly. No, and that's a mistake too that you make, because like we said earlier, you can get Baker Mayfield, you get Derek Carr, you can get all these starting caliber quarterbacks that have 4,000-yard seasons. Kirk Cousins, these type of guys. And I would rather you have 2 or 3 solid running backs and a solid tight end. An elite. I wouldn't even say solid, maybe an elite-ish to solid tight end. Because a lot of times, tight ends is one of those positions to me where you get really, really lucky at. I was a guy last year that was very, very high on Jonnu Smith. He was my starting tight end, and it came back and bit me in my behind, So then I had to find a Robert Tonyan or I had to find a Jim, and they're not consistent each and every week. Yeah. So that's where this year I didn't make that mistake, and I just went high on tight end. I know Travis Kelce is going to get his target share. I know Darren Waller is going to get his target share, and I know Kittle's going to get his, and I know Hawkins is going to get his. So I just go high on tight end.
Yeah. But you can recover, though, if you don't get one of those guys. Like you said, you found Tonyan late in the season. But if you go into week 1 with 2 running backs or 1 running back that you can't rely on, heavily, you can't recover from that. You're going to have to make a trade. You can recover from waiting on a quarterback or a tight end later on. So, I think that's a good example. You drafted Jonnu, and then you got Tonyan later on. But you still wanted to get the surefire Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I still wanted to get the surefire because I was tired of seeing a lot of weeks just having like 5 or 6 or 7 points at tight end position, where that's the position where I'm getting blown out by, because so it's always the hardest position to draft in fantasy football, always, so that's where I'm just like, you can't miss, that's always been my philosophy. Because I've always like, all right, I can get a tight end later on, but then I'm like, okay, well, then you got to deal with certain weeks of inconsistencies.
Right.
I was a guy that was really high on Adam Troutman too earlier on, in fantasy football season, but you see where he's at now, so that's where I just rather just solidify it.
I agree, man. All right, well, I think that wraps it up for this week. Next week we're going to get into Stardom Sit-ems. In 9 days from now we have the Thursday night matchup. So football season's right around the corner. Remember, guys, we're your fantasy GMs. Forgot to put this up earlier, but we will see you next week, and maybe Clayton Holford will join us. So thank you guys for tuning in, and good luck in your drafts as well.